Hello, everybody. Melissa Simonson here, and I've got Dennis Simonson joining me. Thank you, Dennis, for joining me.
No problem.
We are doing our leadership training sessions here, our mini series. And today we're going to start with how to get started. I think it can be kind of overwhelming for people to get into this, when you're first getting started, right? As an e-commerce seller, you have three kinds of customers, right? And we're going to go over the three different kinds of customers here in a little bit. But I think what a lot of people face is this challenge of, I know I need to do something. I know I need to have systems. I know I need to do all these things, but I don't really know how to get started. And I don't really even know the questions to ask to lead to the answer that will help me get started. And that's what we're going to try and talk about today, because it can be very daunting and overwhelming. And we want to help you guys get past that hump so that you can start doing very specific things once you get over the general uncertainty. All right, Dennis. So today, what would you say? We're going to go through the three customer types, but what would you say to seller type A? And guys, for those of you who are wondering, we're going to talk about seller type A, Joe, we're going to call him. Joe is a beginner. He has one product. It's listed on Amazon. So he has sourced a product. He's done some of the basic things, and he understands what needs to be done in general. But he might have a lot more questions than he has answers, and he might not even know what he doesn't know. So what would you say for him if he needs to get started really managing his daily schedule, potentially hiring VAs, growing and scaling? Where would you tell him to begin?
Well, this is kind of the most important question, I think. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it does happen at this stage rather than, when you're actually starting the company and coming up with other things. And there's lots of reasons for it, but without getting any of those reasons, we're a little bit late into the game. And that's not a disaster. It just means that there's more work to be done as a result. As you'll find that as to being a trend throughout the entire, whoever we're talking about, the longer you wait to ask these questions, the more work you've generated for yourself. Again, not something that's irredeemable, but something that you should factor in for sure. Okay, with that being said, the first question we ask ourselves are, what are your daily tasks? And you're like, hey, that's what you just said, right? Like, I just asked you what my daily task should be. Right. But that's it's legit, right? You need to look into there and say to yourself, where's my time best spent to grow my company, to increase my brand presence, to generate more profit? But as soon as I start listing off those questions, something else should be popping up. Well, hey, which one of those is most important? Those are all pretty important. Which one is most important? And that starts to lead you into the second question. It's a little bit difficult, especially with such a broad question, to hop right into me telling you, hey, because it turns out your daily priorities are different based on your business's needs and objectives, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that it's important then to, once you start asking those questions, it does start steering you in the right direction toward where you want to be. So once I've started asking those questions, before you can define them, I think now you raise a different point, which is define your success. What is it that makes this work? What is it that I want from the company and that the company needs? Mm-hmm. Because those should be your daily priorities.
Right.
So you need to figure out what what does my brand mean to me, my business, and my customer, right? If you're just starting out, you need the answers to those questions. Am I a high-end brand that has a longevity guarantee, that has a customer satisfaction retention plan that really goes above and beyond to satisfy my customers' needs? That's great. Am I a medium-term brand with maybe a smaller profit margin and maybe less legwork with the customer service? Or am I maybe just a me too? I say that negatively. It really shouldn't be negative. Am I lower brand equity with a higher brand presence, right? You can actually match kind of some of these low end offers and still have a good brand presence. But those things help you answer the question of, well, should I be spending money on my customer service or my brand outreach? Or, you need to kind of answer that question for yourself, and you need to be honest as well. Like, you have to, if you're assessing your position in the marketplace and you're saying, here's where I want to be, if you've already been selling for 2-3 years under kind of a different brand identity, your customers have made up your brand presence for you. They have an impression of your brand, and you need to match that impression if you want to retain your customer base. So, if you look at your brand and it's not where you want to be, then you have a whole different set of questions. But assuming you're on the right step, that's kind of where you begin. Am I high service? Am I high warranty? Do I have images of quality and quantity to match that? Do I have messaging of quality and et cetera to match my high brand or my low brand or my marketplace? And, who is my marketplace is another critical question in that area, right? Who am I selling to? What's my market segment look like? Are they different than you thought? This happens regularly. I sell gaming accessories, and I found that most of my gaming accessories are bought by the parents and given to the actual gamer, and maybe in some cases the husband keeping it. The point is, you market to a middle-aged mother differently than you market to a teenager or an adult male.
Right.
So, you may have thought your marketplace would appeal to a certain segment, but instead it's a different segment. So finding that answer, understanding that methodology, and there's a number of ways to do it, including Facebook segmentation, et cetera. It used to be super expensive. Now I think, like I said, there's existing tools out there that are much less expensive. And that helps you identify then how you need to speak to your customer, what they want to hear from you, and where you should get in front of them, right? All of a sudden, maybe Good Housekeeping is a magazine that I need to be interested in.
Right.
Whereas initially, that's a big no, right? So you have to be agile enough and honest enough to look into the segmentation and change your marketing approach based on those results.
Yeah.
So those are some of the questions you generate. Finally, this one's a little harder to tie into very specific, to very generic questions, to very top end questions. It's committing to a service level agreement. And what I mean by that is, in this kind of a scenario, right, it's, okay, what brand promises are we making to our clients?
Yeah.
What brand promises are we, touting as a market separator for our brand and our items on that brand? And then how does that fulfill itself? Do we have a customer service team? How do we message our clients when there is something wrong? When there's not something wrong, again, is this high touch point? Is this low touch point? And whatever it is, there needs to be standards. So if it's like, if there's a customer concern, it needs to be responded to within X time period. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be, again, realistic, but it should maybe push the boundaries a little bit so that you are striving for improvement. Looking across all of these different methodologies and I guess when you're coming up with the answers to those brand questions and to some of the what does success look like questions, what I'm trying to say and what the commit to a service level agreement is trying to force you into is committing to actual measurable moments and time frames to resolve things, and these are things that should be recurring. So, again, customer service hops into mind. Fulfillment time, if you're running your own warehouse, if not the FBA time frame, if you're launching a new product and that's something that you're again, whatever it is that you're talking about, it needs to be about committing to a specific time frame. And the reason you do this is because it helps you maintain that focus that drove you to answering this question in the first place. And it helps you maintain that drive through the process, and then ultimately passing off the responsibility to somebody else that is capable, because now you've helped to define how it is that this thing is done, how quickly it responds, and that starts to show through with the brand, right? So if again, once you've added these commitment levels, seller chatbot is a tool for that. There's so many tools for this, but really delving in to find specific, like, here's how quickly we do this. Yeah. When this happens, here's how quickly this company responds to those things, including your own internal customer emails or instant messaging, right? Like, or it could even be something like, we only use instant messaging for this type of question and not this type of question, because some of them will need to be, defined further. And if you send it out via email, then that's something that's potentially something you can refer back to easily. You can go back and you can compare notes and like, oh yeah, this is what success looks like. When we talked about launching this project, we were talking about these things. That's hard to trace down in an instant message. Mm-hmm. So, it can be things like that. This is how we talk to each other. This is how quickly respond to questions from one another. And again, during a project, that's especially critical. And finding the critical moments during the project, that's when you need the service level agreements with each other to be like, we're meeting again in a week. You're going to have this resolved in a week. And this is the next, step in the process.
I really like this. So what's interesting about this to me, even though, like, number one, I really agree with it should be define your daily tasks. That's number one. That's a big deal. You got to know what your day looks like to achieve the success. Number two, helps you define what should be your daily tasks. And then I'm really loving the symbiosis happening here, because after you defined, okay, if my success looks like a happy customer and checking reviews and leaving, comments on their reviews and these kinds of things are what help lead to that success. That's part of my daily task list now. And then the committing to a service level agreement. Now you have an idea. It's, I feel like it's your branding, but it's also a principle, right? If a principle for your company or for your brand or yourself is we always respond in, this time frame, or, we do X, Y, and Z for our customers, then it's more than just something you say, because every principle is a promise. It's a promise of what you're going to do. And so I think that that's so smart that now 1, 2, and 3 are really interconnected. Let's loop it back to Joe real quick, Dennis.
Well, just a minute. I want to tie that in a little bit too.
Okay,
like many times you're going to find these customer service level agreements are going to turn in a daily task for somebody.
Right.
So this is actually now helping you finally get back to answering your initial question, but it helps generate, the answers to those questions from the right place.
Yes.
You can answer these questions, but if you do it on the spur of the moment without asking these questions, I think a lot of times you're going to answer with your emotions rather than with the answer that's best for the business. And so this customer service level agreement starts generating a list of activities that need to happen and the time frame in which they need to happen. And again, generally very repeatable, especially, and it's not necessarily for your own daily tasks. It can be something you farm out later on. Sorry, let's go back to Joe.
No, that's perfect. That actually feeds right into Joe. So if we come back to our seller type A, this is like a beginner seller, then that says, okay, for Joe, if it's something that even later can be hired to a VA or given as a task list to somebody else, if you define it for yourself first, for the success of your business, and you have now a service level agreement with yourself, your brand, and your customer, then now you have a daily task list. If it's something somebody else should be doing for your business, it's certainly something you should be doing. And now that you've defined it, you would be able to hire somebody for that. So go ahead, Dennis, and continue with that.
Yeah, that's the kind of the basics behind it, right? Like once you've assembled kind of some of these customer service level agreements, they're a little bit more defined, and you can actually set resources appropriately for that. Because now, instead of asking yourself, what should I be doing today? Now you've drilled it down to, well, I know that this is one of the things we need to do to achieve the following effects that we wanted to have in the success column. And as a result, I need to assign resources to it. And that could be yourself, and that could be somebody else. And so in order to do that, and especially for Joe, maybe it's time to start looking at a VA, right? Maybe it's time to start farming out some of this activity. And the simple answer to that question will be, is this daily task list something that is achievable for you?
Yeah.
That's a good question to start with, right?
Yeah.
The second question, I think, is, can you, afford to hire a VA? What are the costs involved? What's the potential ROI on that, right? Mm-hmm. And once you, again, have these daily tasks as well, it's a pretty simple math equation. How much can you afford to spend? How much impact will this have on your brand? You've already determined that this was important for the success, so it's got to happen one way or the other. Now, do I need to do it personally? And what level now of sales do I need to have before I should outsource it, right? Because it's very simply now revenue, profit, and how much am I able to pay an employee, right? And you can find rates for that on Empowery, right? There's a lot of nice tools out there to help connect you with the right people, and they help you even ask the right questions, which is invaluable in my opinion. That can be such a big help for beginners in particular. But I think the best way to really dial in success for a new employee, and to make sure that when you are ready to hire that employee, that you really hit the ground running with them, is when you can say, boy, here's your daily task list, and here's procedures for how to go through each one of those.
Yeah.
Because not only, and a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Do I have time for this? Yeah. I've got news for you. If you don't have time for it, you're going to end up with time for it. They're going to ask all the questions, only they're not going to be in order.
Yeah.
They're not going to be at a time of your choosing.
Yeah.
They're not going to be helpful. They may not even be constructively phrased. Right? There may be emotions involved at that point. The whole concept then is, again, by going through this process, by activating that process yourself, by defining it yourself, you have then an idea of how frequently this task can be done by a non-specialist, right? But with someone who probably has more knowledge than the guy you're going to hire. So those are factors. But an understanding of how quickly these things can be done, how many can be done, and now you have the basic measurements of how to judge that person's success on that job. If you don't take the time and energy to define what it is that they're going to be doing, other than, hey, respond to all the reviews. Well, if you haven't looked at it yourself, how many response to reviews do you get daily? Is that worth somebody's full time? And if you're doing it for brand purposes, fantastic. How many of those can they do a day? How many other daily tasks can they accomplish for you? And by defining those things yourself and coming up with a procedure for them, you make sure that it's done the same way, which is important when you're trying to maintain brand credibility as well, right? If you're have a guy that's like tired of customer service for that day, and he's like, well, we'll talk to you after the weekend, right? And like, nobody wants that, right? So the point is, by defining these things in advance, you control the quality that you're going to get out of it. You increase your ability to judge the performance based on that. And then you have an understanding of how high of a level it's being accomplished at when you farm it out. Mm-hmm. And those are all very important things. And that's, I think, should be very helpful to Joe. You know,
Yeah.
there are so many people that have this question, and it is not easy, right? I led a team of, I think it was 60 at its largest point in an shoot office. And it is not easy to be able to communicate with people. And so, you know, they say when you're training somebody that only a small percentage is retained, and I forget what the stat is, and I can't send you the link, but I can say that by having those criteria available for this poor person who's starting a new job, you know, and guess what? There's not that many jobs out there like it. They probably haven't done this before. You're probably asking them to do something that's a little uncomfortable for them. So showing them how it's done, giving them a procedure to do it, and kind of giving them your expectations, those are all very helpful for their success. At the end of the first day, they're going to be like, oh my goodness, they did how many of these things a day? I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
By 2 weeks in, they're thinking to themselves, oh, okay, now I have a pretty good idea of whether or not I'm living up to expectations. And by the way, so do you as their employer.
Yeah.
So, to me, asking those 3 questions, and then especially the third one, the emphasis on the commit to service level agreements, that's how you begin to farm out tasks and reclaim a portion of your day by making that accessible and definable
Right.
for another person.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. All of the things you're saying are really on point. I appreciate it. I think one thing people watching might think is, what? I don't have time for that nonsense.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're very right. At some point, you're going to pay for it, right? You're going to pay the time at some point.
Yeah. The thing is, you know, has anybody ever experienced where you've got a line outside of your office of people waiting to ask you questions? Is it instant chat, and it's you know, hitting you up and it's on fire basically right there in front of you, and your email is full, and like half of them are the same people asking the same question. They just are hoping that the more frequency they get after you, the higher chance you might actually respond to them. They all are going to be aware of how pressed you are for time, and will react accordingly. Who's going to get the question answered first? Whoever thinks they have the hottest topic and whoever's in your face most frequently, that's who's going to win that argument. And that's not good for your time management. That will absolutely pull you out of your priorities and prevent you from accomplishing your daily tasks and asking the bigger questions about what does success look like for my company, my brand, my today. It stops those questions from being asked because you're busy putting out fires that are usually not maybe that important, but there's no other person that can answer those questions. So if you're not taking the time to define it, you're gonna have to answer questions, and probably not once, but frequently, as that person becomes more familiar with and more comfortable with, like, hey, I know how to make sure that I'm doing my job well, and it's by making sure that they are answering my questions so that I'm never making a mistake. If they're spending all their time answering my questions, I know I'm doing well because I've never gone against their wishes.
Right. Well, and I think another way that there's 2 ways. So they're either there's a constant barrage of questions, or they don't ask you because they know
you don't get any questions.
And
then
they don't
want to waste your time. Sure.
And that's how it turns into a fire.
And then that creates the exact opposite issue, right? You don't hear from them. You don't know if your brand standards are being met. You don't know if they're being successful. You assume so, or maybe you don't. But at this point, how are you going to find out? There's only one way. You have to delve in and ask the person, measure their performance, look at what they've done. Are they doing what they said they did? And now you're spending the time anyway to go back and look, but now you don't have any metrics to look against. You don't have any, and to be fair to the employee either, they also have been giving probably very little instruction, right? You probably were maybe pretty detailed the first day and you stepped them through. But you know what? After lunch, and this is the first time they've seen it, and they've never used any of your systems before, right? these are all like the interface is new to them. Maybe they're used to Outlook and you use only Gmail. Maybe they vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it okay for them to ask a question? They look awfully busy. I really don't want to get in trouble. I really like this job.
Yeah.
I can finally work from home. I really don't want to lose it. What do I do? And the answer is whatever they feel comfortable with, right? So going in there and providing them with that definition really can be critical between like whether or not you're going to have success with that person or not. There are plenty of people out there in the world that can go in and make these things happen for you, but you increase the rate of pay by lack of definition, right? You have to have a very intelligent person now to man a job, which is maybe not that complicated, because you don't have the daily definitions and the daily tasks for that person defined, right?
That's a good point. I mean, that's why they like made everything exact with McDonald's, right? They wanted to be able to hire, you know, people with very little training and say, you do one squeeze of this, it's the exact measurement. You do one squeeze of that, and then you're done with your spot.
That's exactly right. Right. And customer service is not that complicated. You can get complicated questions, but at the end of the day, you're going to give that guy his money back. You're going to replace it or you're not. And it can be some variation also of those things. But at the end of the day, those are your options.
Yeah.
There's only 4 results there. So if you tell somebody which ones fall into these buckets, all of a sudden that guy can manage it. And then if it's outside of those 4 buckets or like it's they're threatening a lawsuit or whatever, hey, guess what? That's what escalations are for, right? Now all of a sudden, maybe it makes sense to raise a flag on Instant Messenger or what have you.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay one way or the other. You're going to spend the time once by defining all of these things, or you're going to spend the time every time they have a question. And then you're hoping that guy can train somebody else in the future. Mm-hmm. And again, what tools is he going to have? And how is he going to judge their performance? Or are you still judging the performance, even though he's training them? And what are your brand standards being met?
Well, and I think that the perfect time here, like as Joe, if you haven't started it, before you even know what your daily tasks and all that stuff should be, that's a very difficult time to do it. So if you start it now when you're at Joe level, then that's actually a really good time, I think, because you are yourself trying to accomplish these tasks. You already have to do these things yourself. Yes. So if you take the time to write down what you're doing in a step-by-step fashion, it takes a little bit longer and makes it more of a 2-step process to complete it instead of, whatever it was before. But then you take it from a 2-step process to a 0-step process when you can hand that off to somebody else. I just think that's
you can just like quickly, you're glancing down at the clock. Okay, how long did this step take me? Right. And then how long did this whole procedure take me? And you're right. And again, for some activities, it can, maybe you have to double the time you spend on it because you have to, put it into words and you have to put maybe a nice little video attached to it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it can even help you. If it's something that you're not doing on a regular basis, you don't want to go and figure it out. Like, hey, is there a system for this that you have to log into? Put that in, right?
Yeah.
Is there some other metrics that you're using? Like you have to have an activity based on where your sales are at, right? Like, or your advertising costs, whatever. You can put that in there. Here's what I'm looking at when I'm making this decision about whether or not to decrease a keyword bid, right? Where's it ranked? What's the conversion rate? You can put in the fact that you're making these choices. How are you making them? Put a bit of a blurb in there. And again, the less complex you make the process, the lower price you can pay somebody, or the better person you can get, the better execution you can get if you're willing to pay that person more money.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So then what? With Joe, it's tricky to do number 5, but do you have a variation of 5 you could do for Joe?
Yeah. This is a little bit more complicated for Joe, right? Because Joe's working for himself. But at the end of the day, for Joe specifically, you really still do have only one job, and it is to ensure the success of those beneath you. And in his thing, it's ensure the success of the additional hats that you've assumed below you, right? So your success is predicated then on a number of other things other than you being the owner of your own business, including, again, your daily tasks. So if my daily success is tied to very strongly to my advertising, then I can't lose focus of that, making that more efficient, right? Understanding that better, defining that process better, executing it better every day. Yeah. And that's what I mean by that. And ultimately that grows into like helping your team do those things. But it should, for Joe, help him to say, this is worth my time. Mm-hmm. I've defined what my success looks like. I understand what my daily activity should be. I've committed to service levels and to key performance indicators. Now I actually need to go through and do them, measure them, and then most importantly, look back. I've said these things. I've done these things. Did it work? Yeah. And those are most for projects. That's the most important thing. You go into a project, like, hey, I'm going to launch into Europe. Here's my expectations. Here's how we did it. And I'm going to watch the money roll in. But if you don't go back and look at that and say, we did that. We did all these things. We hit the dates that we were looking for. We got the product in there in time. We had the launch process just like we thought. Did it work? Yeah. What does success look like? Did it actually pan out the way that you thought it was? And then based on those results, do we need to pull the plug? Do we need to ramp it up? Mm-hmm. Do we need to spend more on the launch than we thought? Mm-hmm. There are a number of different ways to handle that. But I've found in my experience, too often, you're just happy to be done with the project. And so you don't really go back and kind of look into there and say, was this successful? And what actions do we take based on the answer to that question? There should, it's a cause and effect, right? It shouldn't just be like, oh, well, that didn't work. Shucks, right? And I don't think there's people out there, oh, shucks, that didn't work. I think that sometimes it just becomes a lower priority to the point where you're like, I don't really want to talk about this. I don't really know what went wrong. We thought all these things were going to happen. But going back there and asking the hard questions and facing the hard answers sometimes can help lead to success, maybe still on that project or just maybe in future projects. You can understand a lot more of these things by going in there and trying to understand. If you're not even getting in there to ask the questions, maybe it's because you couldn't measure a specific metric, right? And maybe that's something that can be addressed by asking the consumer a question up front or by doing a poll first, or there's so many things. Maybe bringing in an expert in this case for launching into Europe, maybe talking to another seller that is very successful in doing those things. Could be outreach. It could be a number of things, but I think going back in there and asking those questions, that's very important. And again, that's the reason why you only really have one job is like, you can't forget, even though you're wearing so many different hats, at the end of the day, if you're not looking back and saying, are the things that are driving my business being done effectively on a daily basis, have I made time for them? That can really help you avoid pitfalls. It can really help you avoid the shiny new thing that seems like it's going to save the world, where in point of fact, you've already defined the things that are most important to your business, right? And they can help you stay on track, and then again, hopefully, put you in contact with somebody that can give you those answers, or somebody that can do that activity for you now, and you can spend more time finding out if those shiny things are, can help you define your future success and you match with your brand. It gives you time to, spend more time on the fun tactical, on the fun strategic questions rather than the tactical questions. But again, sometimes you need to say, if I'm this frontline employee, should I fire myself? Because if you're not getting the job done and you're not, doing the daily tasks that are critical to your business, if you were somebody else, the answer might be yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's why I say you really have only one job. It's like to replicate the activities that build your success. And it may not be the jobs you want, right? Maybe you're an accountant, kind of hate that, right? But not going many places if I don't have an income and don't understand whether or not I'm making money.
And you're paying taxes and now you're in jail.
And then everything else becomes more complicated, right? So you wear some of these hats that you don't like, but this is the reason why, is because they are critical to your success. And then you define the things that you can and push them out to other sources effectively. Yeah.
And I think also, especially in Joe's case here, that this really comes back to why you're doing this to begin with. You are an entrepreneur, you started a business, you're trying to do this for freedom or for whatever your why is. Mm-hmm. And I think that this really only having one job, especially in this case, should really tie back to your why. And I think that you also brought up an excellent point about the shiny object syndrome. I think that everyone should beware the one thing, right? If there's, this one thing, that's going to change everything. Yeah. But it's these daily tasks. If you have consistent progress being made toward goals, that is so much more likely to get you somewhere than one big thing once in a while. And so I think that's really good advice by you, Dennis. Thank you for that.
For sure.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce you guys now to seller type B. Seller type B is Lexi. She is at a mid-level for her business. She has 2 to 3 products. Her revenue is at or above $1 million per year in selling. She may be on multiple platforms, but she's still trying to figure out, how can I grow and scale this business? And she may still be doing things on her own, or might have a couple VAs at her disposal. So this person, this seller type B, what would you tell Lexi? She's now at this same question that Joe had. How do I get started? Where do I go from here? I assume the answers will be somewhat similar, but at a different level maybe than with Joe.
Yeah, they're going to be similar, but as you said, they're also going to be different, right? So, and again, these answers and questions are meant to, inspire people to ask those same questions of their own business, right? Where I'm not defining anybody's success right now, and I'm not going to be able to give you your daily task list right now. But what I can do is hopefully show you that there are tools to help you solve these questions, which, without speaking with other people, can seem pretty overwhelming. And so that's the hope behind these things. So let's hop right in and talk a little bit about Lexi's situation. So if she is already doing pretty well for herself, it kind of depends on where her business is going. Is she happy with the growth? Is it tapering off? Is it, what's going on? And then what is she generally doing already on a daily basis? There are some things she's doing. Are they the most important? Are they critical for her success? Are they driving the growth of the business? Are they are they wasteful a little bit? Are they something that can be accomplished by somebody else?
Right. Because she's got all of the knowledge and all of the abilities and the entrepreneurial fire and everything. Maybe that's stuff that she can use toward other things.
Well, I think transitioning to your first hire, or especially, a lot of times somebody in this spot has maybe already had a few VAs and are maybe just keeping one, because there's a couple of things that they can do by rote, right? Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. I don't have to explain it. It's robotic work, fine, and out of my mind, potentially, right? And everybody's at a different level, but I've certainly spoken with people that match some of those expectations. And this is now a good time to say, you know what? Are there opportunities for me to transition this hat that I wear to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Can I transition this role of customer service agent, sales, advertising? I don't know what it is, to another to a VA, or maybe to another business.
Mm-hmm.
And again, now we're going to get back into define your daily tasks, right? So it's like, okay, well, what are you doing? What should you be doing? And again, there are things that you should be accomplishing to hit your objectives. But before we get super specific beyond that, because some of these things, again, they know on an instinctive level. Right. So maybe one of the things now on their daily task list is to start providing procedures of the things that they're doing on their daily task list, right? Like, you're going through and you're measuring the success of this specific product on a daily basis, right? How many reviews is it getting? How many, do I need to do a product launch? You're kind of checking the overall health maybe of your products. Mm-hmm. There are some metrics that you're using, whether or not you've defined them in your own mind. Oh, wow, I have 4 keywords on the first page in the top 10 results. This is good for this specific product. Yay, high fives all around. And it's maintaining a 4.5 star average. It's whatever these metrics are, take a moment while you're doing this step, mm-hmm. put it down on paper. Understand the daily tasks now that you're doing. Delve into it and really put in some thought process behind it. Why am I doing this? Is it critical to my daily success? Is this something that can use more definition? And if so, let's build a procedure out of it, because I might be able to describe this well enough that somebody else can do it, or at least maybe steps 1 through 10, and then you do 10 through 20. Yeah. Because those are where the money-making decisions are made, or, spending, whatever. But by going through there and asking yourself those questions, you start to understand better why you're doing the things you're doing, and what is involved, and whether or not they can be moved to another person effectively. The last thing that this person, they're all, if you've had any kind of failure hiring people in the past, you feel once bitten, twice shy, and you feel like, oh man, I don't have time to spend answering all those questions. I don't have time to delve into the who's and whys of why am I doing everything? Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if you want to hire other people, those are critical questions. And even though you kind of instinctively know those answers, while you're going through and doing your daily tasks and actually defining why it is that you're doing something, the intent behind it, and the procedure for it will really help you get to a point where you can better understand your own success and better farm it out in the future. This is really important. And I think that it seems like it's going to take so much time. And the first time, actually, this is kind of a skill set. The first few times you do it, it will be hard. Yeah. But once you start thinking about these things a little procedurally, it can help you overcome so many roadblocks, and it can help you avoid so much other time sinks that otherwise will definitely rear their ugly heads.
I will add to that. I mean, as someone who is, working on getting in the habit of doing these same kinds of questions and things to myself, it can feel like if someone else externally is asking you these questions, it feels like they're picking on you or interrogating you. And especially if you don't know the answer. And then if you're trying to ask yourself this question, it's very difficult to make yourself do that, because you're like, I don't want to be interrogated right now myself. Thank you very much. I will carry on now with my day. So I can understand from my own perspective, my own experience, why this is a difficult thing to do. But I also know that when you have to take the time to ask yourself, why am I doing this? then you're defining again the success and what the priority level, that one answer to one of those questions can sometimes answer many more. And then when you're asking them again in the future for a separate activity, some of the answers are already available. And like you said, they become a little easier because you've trained yourself to do it.
That is definitely the intent, right? This is something that can be utilized in many forms and formats, but asking these questions is good for the business. It is, at the end of the day, that's what you want. And it's about using your time smarter, working smarter, not harder. And that's what these questions are designed to get you to do. And so, honestly, I own my own business as well. It's very, very easy to look at what you're doing and say, I don't have time for that. That's a waste of my time right now. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to focus any attention on that. And this is always something you're like, yeah, that sounds like that would be good. But I got a meeting today. Now's not a good time. And then you're like, you're not going to say to yourself, oh, let me slot that in for tomorrow. You're going to be like, let me just put that on the back burner. And, if you're doing that, it's I think you can find yourself in a spot where maybe your daily tasks don't match actually your business priorities, or that again, if you're going to hire somebody else, you are going to have to develop some of those tools for them, or they're going to have to do it, which means you're going to have to hire somebody who's capable of doing that, which means you're going to pay more money and it'll take them time to do those things, in which case if this actually is truly a priority, now one of the things that's critical to your daily success is going to be handled by somebody who's less than proficient at it. So everybody can instinctively agree, I think, that, hey, these questions are good. But I think the trouble comes into play when they're like, this is just not going to make my daily priority list. And so that's why we're trying to talk about these things and show how they intertwine themselves, because sometimes people are like, yeah, that all sounds good, but really, I just need to know how to manage my people. And you're like, well, unfortunately, their efficiency of accomplishing their daily task list becomes important. Yeah. So how are they doing these things? Do they have a procedure, right? Is it going according to the procedure, or are they diverging from the procedure? And so it's, again, you'll find yourself answering these questions anyway. It's just a choice of whether or not you're going to have the answers immediately, or if you're going, and choose the time when you're going to be answering those questions, or if you're going to let it happen organically. And I'm not here to judge. I just do feel like that if you can do it up front and in advance, mm-hmm. It makes you so much more agile. It makes you so much more able to focus on the most important things and learning from mistakes. And that can't be underestimated. As a new business, you try so many new things. So having, the procedure list for something that happens only occasionally can save you specifically time. And it can also help you go back then and look at this thing and say, that really was very well worth it. We can do more things like that. Mm-hmm. Enough of that lecture, but
I get it. But I think it's definitely important for everyone to really understand. Yes, we know it's difficult, and yes, we know, like, you probably don't even want to hear all of this, all of the reasons why you should do it. But we think that it could be very helpful to you if you can do it. I'm gonna try a thing here, so forgive me if this doesn't work out as intended, but I'm gonna try to share a thing really quick. Maybe it might not work. Okay, never mind. I'm trying to put like an image in here. Oh no. Okay. It's not gonna work. Well, that's a shame. Okay, but isn't this fun playing with all the different ways I can do the video?
Yes.
So what I was thinking of right then was there's that funny meme that has, the cavemen they're trying to drive their wheelbarrow with the square wheels. And this guy's like, hey, I've got a round wheel here that's going to make you go much faster and it's going to be easier. And they're like, no, I'm too busy. I don't have time for that nonsense. So that's kind of, I think, what the whole premise is about this is
It is.
if you can improve the way that you're doing things to save time in the end, you have got to make time for that because you don't have time to keep having fires pop up.
So this is spoiler alert. Number 5 is you really have only one job, and that job is making yourself into a force multiplier. You're making yourself into a 5x of your team, and you do that by empowering them to understand what they're doing on a daily basis, to providing them with the tools for success to accomplish those daily priorities, and then decision-making capabilities as well, right? Like what are they allowed to what decisions are they allowed to make? What ones are they not allowed to make? By you defining what is and is not acceptable for these positions, especially for somebody in Lexi's position, it helps you become that force multiplier rather than a bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You are the bottleneck if everybody has to seek your permission first. Yeah. If they don't understand how something works or why something is being done, the why of things is so important. It can be included on a procedure. This is why we do it this way. That helps your employee buy in to the procedure. If they can see that, hey, I have to go check on this thing on a daily basis and I don't understand why I'm doing it, but whatever, I've logged in. Yeah, great. Check out. That's maybe not the attitude that's going to get you all the results. But if you instead are let them know, this is how we're making sure that our customers view our brand in this way, and specifically to achieve this result, right? To let people know, oh, you weren't satisfied. You know, I don't think we heard from you. In our brand warranty, please reach out to us. We would love to help you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a better message than just somebody up there like review. I hated this stuff. I think people are jerks, and I never want to see them again. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. We'd love to hear from you because it sounds like something went really wrong, and we can fix it.
Yeah,
like that changes the narrative all of a sudden, right? And so explaining in your processes and to the employee the why behind the daily tasks and the activities can spur motivation as well. So I think then moving on to defining Lexi's success, right? Again, is it about growing your project? Is it about growing your business? Is it about increasing profitability? Is it about adding more products to your product line? Is it about selling into Costco, Home Depot, Lowe's, all of these people? I have a flooring background, so forgive me the latter two. What does success look like? Is it getting your brands into, Office Depots? Is it getting it into a larger brand store? Is it, what does that look like? And that helps you, again, look at your daily task list with a lens of perhaps I need to pass these things on, or perhaps I need to refocus where they should actually be. Mm-hmm. Because, where you spend your time is where the business is going to improve. And if you don't feel like your daily priorities match your success, then quite simply, you're not going to achieve the success that you're looking for. Maybe you're going to hit some wildly successful other goals in other people's minds, but for yourself, if you're falling short, there's only one way to rectify that. And it's really to delve into there and say, was my intention to have a hands-off business, or was my intention to have a bunch of VAs that I could run, or do I want to have a local office? Do I want to hook up with a bunch of vendors that can handle this for me so I can maintain my rigid control over the system with myself being the only employee by leveraging these other companies out to my advantage?
Right.
So, at this point, and again, hopefully Lexi has asked some of these questions and is kind of working towards some of those things, but definitely looking at that on a per project basis, but also at large, right? Because that's really the question we're answering today is, what should I be doing? And so
And sorry, I'm just going to jump in for a quick second because I think that, especially if you've gotten to this point where you've got a couple products and stuff, you have an idea in general of what success looks like that you're kind of doing steps toward. But until you really, really focus in on these questions and ask yourself today, what does success look like? If I complete these several things, is that success? If I achieve this result with my customer or with my employee or with, whatever, is that what success looks like? If you are not asking yourself that question, you are missing something that you may not have defined yet. And that's really important because I think that if you keep things broad, then you're going to keep getting hit with these random little things that, this just isn't working. Why isn't this working? And you don't know why. But it's because you didn't ask yourself the questions ahead of time to kind of help guide the ship a little bit.
It really is almost blinders, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you're basically defining your parameters for what your blinders are going to be so that you can focus.
Yeah.
It's a strange way to put it, but that's one of the primary purposes behind this is to say, you know what? I attended a conference and they had a bunch of great ideas. But I can access that video and I can do that later because right now I know that what's important to me are these things. And I can only afford to do so many new projects because of monetary reasons. Maybe it's human resources reasons. Whatever the reasons are, that helps you really sift out new ideas pretty quickly. And it helps you to focus on what's the most important new project that I can work on by defining, hey, this is what's critical to my business. And it's different for everybody. But asking those questions sifts out what your focus should be. And it helps you to really dial up then also where to leverage more effectively what you're doing. Because some things you're probably doing very well at that level. Right. If you're at the level of success that Lexi has, either things are going very well, or maybe it's slightly starting to trend downward. Maybe you need a relaunch. Maybe you need to a new hero product. Who knows? But if you're not asking yourself those questions, you're putting off a defining moment in your company's history. Right? Is this? Is it time to kill off a product that used to be a hero but is now an albatross, right? These are things you have to ask yourself. And then, it can really help you to focus like, oh, you know what? I don't know the answer to this question. Let me get an expert on the line. Let me talk to somebody who's doing this thing that I think is critical to my success, because I notice now that even though I'm doing things that are helpful toward it, but I haven't really addressed the main thrust of the problem, which is that I've lost momentum, I've lost some sales, and these activities that I have been doing have not shown any promise. And so I need to get out there and I need to talk to these people. And surely there will be an idea out there somewhere that can help me achieve direct success based on what I've defined.
Yeah, that is well said. Okay, so then let's say she gets it. She's defining her success on many levels, the overall success, the success of each of the kinds of projects that she's determined to be priorities, and her daily success of having each of these tasks that she's defined. So what's next for her?
Well, I think it's committing to those service level agreements, right? So for her, and again, she's probably at least working with other companies. Most likely she's maybe had a VA and still has one, but maybe they're not optimal. Maybe she's got a few and they're just kind of doing busy work. And again, if you're not in that scenario, then that's okay too, right? Like, I'm just trying to help people that are in that position. And so, if that is the case, how well have you defined their projects, right? Are there things that you can take off of your plate by simply defining it, explaining why it's important, and then marking the key performance indicators of these daily activities, right? How many can you do a day? What does a successful activity look like? Is it a sale? Is it an ad that is converts? Is it the ad that has a high click through? Is it finding more keywords to spend ads? I don't know what it is. It depends on the activity. But for sure, you can look in there and say, well, I know that it's working if this happens.
Yeah.
And providing as many of those points as you can. And then later on, when you're managing a lot of people, or even if you have the time and you like to focus on being a force multiplier, then you can go back in there and you can really look at those things and say, you know what? I thought initially it would be this metric, but in fact, I think we can measure this other thing if we change the way we're doing it here. And that will really help us understand better how this activity can be improved and therefore achieve more daily success. Right. So for Lexi, it's really go through your day. How many things that you're doing do you personally need to do? And how many of those things can you define and send out to a third-party service or to a VA or to somebody in your office? Yeah. And it's about, again, committing to those service levels. Like if you have those people in your organization already, how quickly are you responding to their concerns? If you go off to a conference and you're gone for 3 days, is the office virtually on fire? Right? Are there some legit concerns that they have, or do they just feel like it? Right? A lot of times they're making it because they don't know any better. 100% of their focus is not going the way that they want and the way that they know you want. But in the bigger picture, you're like, hey, actually, there's a couple of customer complaints. Hey, it's not that hard to handle, or maybe it's, product, whatever it is. You know how it's going to be handled. But for them, it's their livelihood at stake.
Yeah.
And it's your livelihood that they think they're affecting. So having some metrics that they can understand and judge their own performance by, really helpful, right? Also, it tells them like, this is well outside of normal tolerance. Mm-hmm. I think I need to ask them a question. And all of a sudden you can begin to train your guys to be like, you know what, this is an aberrant behavior. We need to really find out why this happened. Is this a new trend? And if so, is it a good trend? Is it a bad trend? Right? It helps you get in front of issues because now your people understand, what's important. This isn't just about defining your own success. By defining the success of the brand, the company, the product, you now are saying, okay, good. This is all things that I can communicate to a vendor, to an employee, to whatever, a purchaser of your business, whatever it is. Now you have the tools to go in there and say, hey, this is an early warning system for things that are different. And my people understand when things are different because we've gone through and we've defined how these things are handled, what they look like. And again, I didn't ever get to this point, but I think it's important for you to commit to your people when they're going to get an answer to things, right? Are you going to look at things when you're gone at 8 a.m. Pacific time? I don't know, whatever time zone you're in, you're going to commit to I'm going to look at my emails at this time. You don't have to worry about it. I'll be gone. You won't see me. I'll be doing highfalutin things as far as they're concerned, but you're going to respond to their emails at the same time. Or, you're flying during that time, so it will be delayed, right? Mm-hmm. Setting their expectations. When am I going to hear back from my boss? Because things are different. Yeah. They told me to expect this, and it happened. Now I need an answer. You have to be there for them, and they have to know that. Otherwise, you're getting your cell phone called. They're waiting outside your office. They're panicking. They're telling things to the customer that can't be accounted for because they don't know what's happening. They don't know the answer. And as soon as it happens, they're off on their own. And if they don't understand why they're accomplishing something, they have to make up an answer or not answer.
Yes, yeah. And this is definitely one of the ones that I think we're going to do a follow-up on, because I think there's an emotional component to this where, you really, if you're not setting them up with these kinds of expectations and service level agreements, they may come to work. And this is, I think, really key to where they feel, I'm key to the business and I'm a really great contributor, thank you, and not just a cog in a wheel. Or it doesn't matter if I show up every day, I keep screwing things up anyway, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. All of this, I think, it could be here or here so easy just by doing or not doing these things. So I think that's a good follow-up one. What do you have next, Dennis?
You may have seen this before, but especially for potentially with vendors, this could work as well. But you're answering questions from your staff with questions, right?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Why do you think you're doing it? And actually expect a response.
Yeah.
Because it gives you then an insight into what they're thinking, right? And you can get some pretty flippant response, which tells you something about that employee, right?
Yeah.
It also should tell you maybe a little bit about your management style or your perception through the employee's eyes, right? So answering a question with a question can be very effective, especially when they're trying to work through a problem, right? Mm-hmm. In their mind, they've gotten to a point now that they cannot proceed without your interference, right? They need you for some reason. So if they come in and they say, Melissa, I need to know, can I give this guy a refund or not? Then the answer to that should be, well, I don't know if you have processes and procedures in place, but if you do, you say, does it fall inside of our return guidelines? Mm-hmm. Does it fall inside our refund guidelines? Well, no. But I was thinking that that maybe we make an exception. Well, it doesn't fall within our guidelines. So what kind of, why would we be making an exception for this person? I'm not necessarily against it, but
right.
Tell me why. Well, this person, lives with her mom, and her mom said that her cat ate it, and it looked really attractive to them because we had a feather on there, and cats like to eat feather. I don't know. But
the scenario thing that's happening right now.
Very likely, this has happened. Okay? This is a true
story.
True stories, people. The whole point being that they've got some kind of justification for this, or maybe they don't, in which case you're forcing them to really delve into, wait, why do we have this return process in place? Why do we have the refund process in place? And what would constitute an adequate reason to go outside of those terms? Right. It helps you identify when your brand is not living up to its expectations, right? If you have these promises out there and then your product does something unexpected, your employees are going to be the first ones to hear about it. And they're going to be the first ones then to ask you, like, hey, I don't feel comfortable answering this question. So asking them context for the reasons they're asking the question forces them to think. It forces them to understand the why of the procedures better. It forces them to put themselves in the position of both the manager and the customer. So answering these questions with a question is very powerful. Especially, again, when they feel outside of their depth. I don't understand why I'm doing this on a daily basis. Okay, what don't you understand about it?
Yeah. Well, and I think you're so right in this. Like, again, this is multi-purpose. So the answering a question with a question, they're discovering things. They're also training themselves in how to respond to something without asking you next time. But really beautiful about this is that I think that when they're discovering more of the why and things like that, then they get a better sense of what they're doing it for, what they're working for, and
right.
they start buying in. They start buying in.
Yeah. So it's a way to improve communication. It's a way for them to buy in better. It's a way for kind of some bonding to happen, right? Like, oh, actually what I'm doing is a little important and this is how it impacts this and this. Mm-hmm. It also is beginning to train these people to perform at a higher level, to take on more complicated tasks, because the more they understand about the way their role fits into the company and the company's success, the more opportunity now they have to say, oh, well, what about this? And then when they're broadening their horizons like that, all of a sudden, maybe there's a few more procedures that you can pass their way. Maybe there's a few more things that they are interested in doing. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, you can find an employee who has an interest in accounting. I don't know, in something. Who would be an accountant? No, I'm sure they're out there though. The whole point is you can find that they have an interest in certain things, and you can capitalize on that while making it work better for your business, right? Mm-hmm. You start asking these questions, you find that they have an affinity for getting answers to questions in a specific field. You know, maybe now you have a specialist in a subject you didn't understand, or that can work side by side with you on a project where you thought you were going to have to do it yourself. So, you know, don't just toss out the answers. A lot of times this is just a behavior where they understand, like, hey, when I don't understand something, it's the easiest thing is to get the right answer from the person that knows. And that's always the owner, or, you know, the manager, I guess it could be. Yeah. But that's them going for an easy answer to the question. I need to check this off my list, move on to the next thing in my day, and, you know, pick up my paycheck at the end of the week, and I'm out. But when you start answering their questions with a question, it forms a habit. It forces them to think to themselves, okay, well, I can't just say, can I give them a refund? I better check and look at the process to see if it fits in the refund criteria. Otherwise, they're going to ask me that, and I'm going to be like, I don't know, I didn't look, and that doesn't look very good. So I'm going to roll my eyes and go check the procedure, right? And then you're going to, you know, say, okay, well, you know, I still think they should get it, but it doesn't fit inside the refund criteria. All right. Now he's going to ask me why I think it should be an exception to the rule. So, you know, I better come up with a good argument. And it can be the basis of a change in policy for you potentially, or it can be an addition to the procedure that you already have in place. It can really help the customer. Mm-hmm. It can help the business, and it can help the position. And again, it's just, instead of supplying the answer, you're forcing them to help supply the demand to the questions that they have, by forcing that behavior to a point where they're like, when they go to you, they should have the, you know, potential answer there. Well, here's why I think that we should do this. Here's all the things that I checked, right? Mm-hmm. So don't ask me that. I have already checked those, right? And then you're also potentially, you know, taking action based on their feedback. And these are all things that both help the business and it helps nurture growing employees. So, you know, yeah. And then can even be, you know, maybe you do even an FAQ with a procedure, right? Like, hey, these are common questions. Here's the answers to that. It probably seems super in depth, but I'm telling you, the more complicated the task, the more resources you have, the better trained your employees are going to be, and the more buy-in and the more success they're going to have with it. And again, as we've looked before, if you've defined their success, those are the daily activities that should bring about success for the business. And so the next thing that comes to mind is you really have only one job. You should be a force multiplier. You need to go in and help your people be more effective. Help your agents, right? If you're hiring an ad agency, understanding what they're doing, asking them questions, right? Why is this happening? What do you intend to do about it? What is the result we should be seeing, right? How long should this take? All of those things help make you a force multiplier. And you're only going to have, a real scalable business when you can approach things like that, when you're starting to make your people more effective, right? And again, that's why this other stuff works, because you've gone down and you set your own priorities. You've gone in there and you've said, these priorities are the key to my business's success. You've gone through and you've said, here's the activities to know whether or not, to measure whether or not this has been effective.
Yeah.
Then you've gone in and you've asked your questions to staff so that they are learning as you go. And so the last one really is, are you committed to it?
Yeah.
You've gone through and you've done all these activities. You've gone through and you've taken the time to do these things. It's because you want your business's success. So carve out the time. Take the opportunity when you're doing something to try and define it when it's repeatable, right? When it's something you're doing regularly, or on a measurable day, right? Like if it's quarterly or whatever it is, take the opportunity to define it, save you some time to send that out. If you're hiring even somebody else to do that thing in the future, to do your accounting or whatever and you have a procedure in place, that only makes things easier, because now you can go in there and you can see whether or not they're doing it in the same way that you would have and how effective they're being with it. Yeah. Really, again, even though you're the owner, even though you're doing all these things, if you truly have gone in and defined your success and your daily priorities based off of those, how can you possibly argue that taking the time to do these things is not the most important thing you have to do on a daily basis?
Oh, yes. Well wrapped up there. I like that. You put a whole bow on it for you guys. Drop the mic.
Yeah, and I'm out.
So I know we've kept this one a little bit long. We'll break this up into bits and pieces for our members and stuff. I do want us to still hit on seller type C if you still have a few minutes, Dennis. Sure. So we'll try and keep this a little bit shorter. But here's the last scenario. So if you guys are not at Joe's level anymore, you've increased your stuff. If you've passed Lexi's level, you're more than $1 million for maybe an 8-figure seller, and you maybe have a whole catalog of products. You could already be in retail stores like REI or Costco, Walmart, many of those other kinds of places, Staples, Lowe's, like Dennis said. This would be your level. This is seller type C, Eric. Meet Eric. Eric is at this level, and so he's going to have a whole different way of approaching these 5 key things, just like Joe did and just like Lexi did. When you're at a different point in your business, then you have to approach each of these keys in a different way, and it makes you ask different questions based on the needs of your business. So, Dennis, can you take us through starting with key number 1?
Sure. Okay. So, Eric really has a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't work. The thing that Eric's probably really struggling with is that he probably grew it organically, and he probably hasn't gone through and, defined success and defined daily tasks. And there's a number of people then in Eric's company that he's working with, or that he has hired specifically, that are doing a lot of things, and he has expectations of them, but maybe he doesn't have a good report card for each of them. Maybe he doesn't have a good way to manage them, and maybe they could use some definition to, why they're doing the things that they're doing, and whether or not it's actually still bringing success to the business. So I think at this level, really, a lot of the questions you need to ask are, hey, is this thing still working? Right? You've got maybe a number of products. Maybe you've got a lot of SKU children, right? Parent-child SKUs. Are all of the children still selling? What, do you have any kind of criteria for your people to examine that? Is that something you still do personally? Is it something you should be doing personally?
Right.
Those are good questions to ask. If you're selling into retail stores, do you have a liaison? Is that still you? Should it be you? Maybe that's critical. And if it's generating a lot of sales, fantastic. How many resources go toward that? Is it the same deal you thought it was when you signed up for it? Are they maintaining the expectations in the same way that you would? Are they building the brand in the way that they thought you would? How are things going from your side? Are there ways for you to push more product through them? Do you have somebody that's kind of focused on that success? Is it a serious percentage of your business? Because if so, maybe having somebody looking for ways to grow that business daily and to make it more efficient daily, if they're doing 10%, 25% of your business, that becomes a really important question. So, looking into there, finding out what all the things that you're doing, and there's got to be a lot at this point.
Yeah.
So at this point, go in there, find out, you have people doing all these things. And here's the thing, you may be the manager of all those guys. I've definitely heard those scenarios, right? Where they're not reporting to somebody else, they're reporting to you. So if you've got 10 people that are all reporting to you, you're maybe stretching your limits.
Yeah.
Because you theoretically still have things that you need to be doing other than managing your people. So beginning to ask the question about, maybe do I hire a manager? Maybe it's just a supervisor. But when you begin asking those questions, you're like, okay, well, how do I tell this person what they're supposed to do and what their people below them are supposed to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
So where do we start? And it's in the subtitle. I'm going to give you a hint.
Sorry about that.
It's defining your daily tasks and then defining everybody's daily tasks, right? And again, the better you can do here, the more specificity you can provide, the better job a manager can do, even if that manager is you. You understand theoretically what they should be doing, but are they actually doing what you think they're doing?
Yeah.
That job may have changed. They may have adapted on the fly to circumstances in the field that you don't know about. And by the way, you hope that is what happened.
Yes.
Right? In many cases, that's a positive thing. But in some cases, that can be problematic at best. If your warehouse is starting to change the way they're doing stuff, you need to know.
Yeah.
And especially because they're training people without your knowledge of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And you may not know how to accurately judge how long something takes anymore. You may not be able to accurately determine what good criteria are for hiring that position anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's less likely, but still, if you've automated some of the process, if you've engaged a new system, now all of a sudden, maybe a guy that has 40 years of warehouse experience isn't going to be able to adapt as quickly to a new warehouse system that integrates with Amazon and eBay and Walmart and Costco.
Yeah.
And that might be beyond him. And maybe it's not. But now you have new criteria to look for, right? Now you have better questions to ask during an interview. Now you have different things that define success in those positions. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about trying to understand what they're doing. It's still about defining your success. It's still about understanding what it is that they're doing and how it's contributing to your growth and your existing sales and your existing relationships, etc. So going through then defining your daily tasks and now defining what success looks like becomes more important, because most likely at this point, when a company achieves a certain level of growth and revenue and people, there is a certain percentage of waste. And the less you can, the more you can maximize your efficiency, the more you can reduce that waste, then the more chance, the more opportunities you have to make money and to stand out above your peers. And so this is where going through and defining what success looks like. And again, as you've grown, that can change, right? Who is your target market? Did that change, right? Was it different than you thought? Are you catering to your people because you've grown organically and you've understood, hey, this initial approach that I thought was going to be fantastic ended up like Amazon changed something and I had to adapt, and now it's this. And now my sales are fulfilled by merchant, or they are primarily through my website, which would be great, or maybe not, depending on what's happening. Whatever it is, you are reacting, and you have reacted, and now that's baked into the processes that your company is doing on a daily basis, whether or not that's for the best of the business. So going through there, defining, hey, what are the critical activities that my company is doing on a daily basis? What should they be? And how should they look if they were being perfectly efficient? It gives you the opportunity then to go through and give you a checklist of things. All right, well, first I need to look at this, re-understand what it is that I'm doing and what it is that they're doing for me. And then I need to go through and say, yeah, this has changed a bit. Or, like I do want to hire people. I need to define this. I do want a manager. I don't have the time to answer all the questions that are constantly generated from 10 different people in 10 different positions. I can't be a specialist in 10 positions. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to count on those people. But in the meantime, I can potentially now ask some of them, hey, what is it that you're doing on a daily basis? I want you to make a procedure. Here's how you do it, right? And you go through and you have them help define what it is that they do. And you might find some things missing that are critical for their success, right? Like, oh, well, let's go ahead and add that in there, because I think actually shipping the product from the warehouse is important, and we have that on there. So going through there and making sure that that you understand what they're doing and that they understand what they're doing can be enlightening. It also then provides you with a kind of a template of, okay, well, if all of the people are doing these things in the warehouse or in product research or in whatever categories you have, a manager will need to be able to see that they're doing these things, right? And then measure their success.
Yes.
Based on committing to the service level agreements.
Yes, and this I love. And I'm going to just jump in for a second. I'm going to let you get back to it because you know so much more about this than me. But what I love about this is that with the service level agreements and kind of understanding exactly what they're getting into, right? So at this level, at Eric's level, then they're going to need to have a service level agreement with their managers. They're going to need to have a service level agreement with their staff. They should have a service level agreement that their staff and managers can expect from them. Like, I commit to doing this for you. So I think all of those you're going to get into here in a little bit. But what I want to really say is, if you are trying to manage all these people and you're having a hard time, and so you think that the answer is, I'm going to hire a manager to manage these people for me because I don't have time for this, they are going to be coming to you with the exact same number of questions because you haven't defined what they can expect from you and what you should be expecting from them.
Right. A good manager will want to know whether or not his people are successful, right? A good manager will want to know whether or not he is successful.
Yes.
And it is not simply bringing them on board and showing them what you're doing, because it may be a common occurrence for an entrepreneur not to feel comfortable turning over the keys to the kingdom, right? Yeah. You're like, you know what? This isn't something I want to give you. Sorry. like, it's access to the bank account is off the books, right? That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Which is fine. There should be limits, but you have to make sure that this person understands what those limits are.
Yes.
And you have to make sure that they can go in and measure the productivity of the people that they're going to manage. And if you make it their job to go in there and define all of their people's daily responsibilities and the metrics that should be associated with them, there's probably managers out there that can do that, but you've now made them kind of an enemy of those people. Those, your daily workers will then look at that person like, I have to take time outside of my daily responsibilities to help you understand what I'm doing. This seems like an outrage to me. I've been doing this for a long time. Who are you to judge what it is that I'm doing?
Right.
It creates a needless sort of friction. It creates, a dynamic that can be easily avoided.
Mm-hmm.
Again, by having them delve into, hey, what is it that you're doing? What do you feel like drives the success behind your activities? Having them define that can save you a lot of time.
Right.
And then you can have a manager maybe go over some of that with you when you talk about this, when you look at that. And then it's like, it's not something that they're doing. It's not something that, that kind of attitude is something that a good manager will be able to handle at some point anyway. But you need to think about making this hire successful. You're going to put a fair amount of time and energy into it, and you're absolutely going to be putting money into it.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't you protect your investment?
Right.
Why wouldn't you go through and try and turn this investment of your time and money into an asset by showing them and telling them what success looks like, what are the daily priorities for the position, theirs and their employees, and what your expectations are for that person, right? And then coming up to the KPIs for that position, the key performance indicators.
Yep.
How often are you going to speak with them? When do they get a chance to talk with you about their performance? Do they have the ability to hire and fire?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have the ability to hold meetings with their employees? Because ultimately their success will be colored through your vision.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not going to do them the favor of telling them how you think they need to manage and how you're going to be judging their performance, you're really setting them up for failure.
Wow, that's so true. So true.
So again, defining, what it is that they need to get done, how it's going to happen, when they can speak with you, how often certain things need to happen. And again, what they're going to be measured on. How do they know that they're an effective manager? They should understand this, and you absolutely need to understand it, because if you just are going by the snippets that you see, I've seen people that they talk a really good game. And, but if you talk to their employees, universally, they will say something else. And if you don't have an understanding, like one of the things in my opinion that should be included on metrics for measuring a manager is a survey of the team. Now you're going to get an idea, like if you're an effective manager, you're not always going to be friends, but what they should, you can read into some of these responses, or you can personally interview those employees, but you'll start to get an idea of very quickly how well liked he is by the team and whether or not their complaints about the manager are justified. If they're trying to come up with reasons, right, it's going to become obvious. If they just don't like him because he's ruling with an iron fist in a way that you want him to, right, to hold them to KPIs, to hold them to their daily task list, and to showing up on time and clocking in and clocking out, those are good things. And so, having a 360-degree review, 360 degrees, where you're asking their employees what they think of their manager. And by the way, you can do this for yourself as well, right? How are you doing? How, could you be improving, et cetera? Those are still valuable. But having that kind of an input gives you, it lets them also know, hey, I probably had better phrase these things in the best way possible, because they do have an opportunity to impact my level of success and to give feedback to management. And it's not just a one-way street. And then, as I said, there's a number of ways to go about that, but those are a couple of things that I feel very strongly about.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's good reason behind that. I appreciate you going into that in detail. Okay, so in this case, let's say it's the managers that are coming to you with the questions, as might be the case for Eric. So how would that look? What are the kinds of questions that you would throw back at them in that case?
Yeah, and again, it depends on the question, but it still works very similarly, right? Mm-hmm. Like Ryan out in the warehouse is, he's really not performing as well as I thought he would. I'm frustrated. What should I do about that? I'm not sure. What do you think the problem is?
Yeah.
How do you think you should be handling it? In what ways is he causing a problem? Is it preventing him from achieving his daily tasks? What is the core that's making you feel this way? What is the core behavior that's causing this concern for you? Because if it's critical to the definition of success, if it's critical to the accomplishment of the daily tasks, those are things you need to know about. And whether or not this guy is achieving it, your manager's basically like, I feel like there's an issue. I need to know whether or not I have the authority to solve it. Or if you have a better idea, what are my parameters here is kind of probably what he's really asking.
Right.
So helping him to define what is actually occurring. Is it a core competency problem? Is it a core business question, right? Is it something that affects the success level of the business? Does it affect the brand? Or is this simply like he's having an issue with interpersonal issue with the manager or with somebody else? There are a number of ways to delve into this, but asking him more about, like, hey, by the way, he's a manager. He needs to go in there with a potential solution in mind. Here's what's happening in my opinion. Here's what I think we should do about it. But you're the brand owner. You're the owner. I need to understand what's most important to you and how to identify what the best course of action is. Because I've worked for a number of other people and I have an opinion on what should happen, but I don't feel comfortable in your system yet because I don't know how highly you prize this brand, or I don't know what you define as critical to the success. I don't know essentially what success looks like in your eyes. And so this is an opportunity then for you to give context. Oh, you know what? I've seen that happen with Ryan before. Last time he was having a tough time at home. I think we can talk to him about it and offer, maybe if we let him off 30 minutes early, he gets time to do this other thing. He comes in 30 minutes earlier, or maybe he only takes a half an hour lunch break instead of a full hour. Maybe there's a way we can work with Ryan to reduce his external difficulties so that he can accomplish his priorities again for the business.
Yeah.
And that your manager will say to himself, oh, okay, so we can be a little creative. We care about the people. And so I can be a little creative in trying to retain him and be helpful in my problem solving, right? I can go to Ryan and I can say, oh, guess what? Maybe these days don't work for you. Maybe this alternate set of days would work better. Maybe becoming a part-time employee would help him solve some of those external issues. You don't know, but now you've given him the tools to ask questions to potentially solve the problem, and kind of given him a parameter of how you handle issues in your company and how you care for the employees. Because some companies, that's not going to stand, right? Like, I'm sorry, no, this is a call center. If you're not answering the phone on these times at these days and you're not working full time, it can't work for us. And it's really unfortunate, but the answer is no. So it really, it's still kind of the same thing. Ask your manager. You're teaching him how you go about solving that process. You're forcing him to say, this is how close we are to thinking in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
The more times you have him answer that question and provide him with your context, all of a sudden now you're at the same level. You can think the same way. You have the same answers to those potential questions. So now he's like, hey, by the way, this is what's, happening over here. Here's what I'm going to do as a result of that. Let me know if you have any suggestions. And it's an email instead of a half an hour meeting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, okay. So this one, with Joe and with Lexi and with Eric, all these these seller types, I think that this one, it's definitely the hugest one, I think, in so many different ways. And we're going to go into more detail with different scenarios and stuff in future episodes of this. But I think you really touched on some really important ones there. And one of the things that I think, at least as a mom, that I can identify with is, I think if you're looking at this, especially in Eric's position, as dealing with children, as terrible as that sounds, it's very similar. It's, they might ask you a question and not know the question they should be asking. And that happens often to parents. So when kids come to you and they say, I don't want to eat that dinner. Do I have to eat dinner? And what they're really saying is, I missed you when you were at work, or something like that, right? It's a totally different thing. They're asking a different question, or they're trying to get at something completely different. When you start asking them questions, well, is it about this? Is it about that? Then it helps them hone in on what the actual issue is, so that in the future they're training themselves to identify the issue or the question that they actually have ahead of time.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a way to help yourself identify the core problem rather than the symptoms of the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And without taking the time to do those things, especially at the management level, but even at, your level or the employee level, you're still drilling into the things that are most important. You're still providing a context of understanding. And by asking them those questions, they're forced to actually reevaluate the question that they're asking, because they're now seeing that they may not have asked a question that will get them the answer that they needed. And so again, asking those questions, and I'm not saying never give them an answer. What I am saying is, by asking all those questions, you're creating a context to enlighten their understanding, to make better decisions in the future. If you've explained the same scenario to the guy 4 times and he doesn't have any idea of how you want to solve this situation, he is not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And either you're not a great communicator, which could happen, but again, after it happens that many times, maybe this guy he's not really into his job. Or, whatever the case is, maybe this warrants a procedure. Maybe this warrants an FAQ. It should help you provide context to how can you better help your people? Because again, you really have only one job.
Love that.
I worked it in. So it's, so you really are trying to figure out how to make your people more efficient. And when you are asking questions like that, and you're seeing what their thought process is, and vice versa, now you're really in a better position to help them become more efficient, to invest in a system potentially, right? Sometimes the seller's going out there and like, I'm going to buy this thing because it sounds like we could really use something to make us more efficient. And if you're asking questions of your employees and they're in return providing, answers that they think are important, all of a sudden you have a better insight. If we had a tool to help us out with that, this may cause them to be more efficient, more measurable, more whatever it is, more able to affect the company's success in a positive manner. Now you can make better decisions on systems, on people, on projects. And again, if you're doing it right, you've got the people in place now. you've asked the right questions, and it's really about letting them loose in a format that is controlled by their understanding of what success looks like through your vision. And if you've really done a good job, you have reminders of that. You have procedures for that. You have, a mission statement. You have projects that are all built around these criteria, and you recognizing how to empower your people to bring you that success and bring your company the success that you outlined.
I love it. I love it so much. Okay, we're gonna let everyone get back to their day now, but I think that these are such important things. And Dennis, I really appreciate you taking the time to really lay these out. We're going to use these in many different formats for empowering members and for anybody who has need of leadership training. Because I just think not only is this, okay, when we're looking in terms of an e-commerce seller and seller type A, B, and C, we want to help out Joe, Lexi, and Eric so that they can do their best. We also want to point out the fact that regardless of what type of business you're in, these are extremely useful. So let's say, for me personally, I'm hosting an event. So I need to, talk to my venue people. I need to let them know what success looks like to me so that they have expectations. I need to let them know, okay, this is what we need to do when people arrive. You need to have somebody there greeting them, or, whatever that looks like. And when you're talking to your vendors, these same things apply. It's not just if you're talking about employees or VAs. So this can be for many people in many different situations, but we're trying to help you identify with each of these by identifying these.
And I think an easy way to get into it is by looking at like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this project, or I'm in the middle of this project. Take the time to work through this on a project level and find out if it's helpful. Does it sharpen your focus? Does it help provide the right parameters? Does it help you get better results? And I think you'll find the answer is yes. And not only that, as you sharpen these skills, it becomes second nature to you. And you can look at a situation and you can say, I need to do this. And here's the processes that I need to write down so that somebody else can replicate this result. And, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to look and see if this project was successful based on these criteria. And, you become far more efficient, lean, mean fighting machine, right? You go in there and you really have a good understanding of what's critical to your daily success and where your next project should be and what they should accomplish for you. And I think it's an incredibly powerful tool.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Dennis. Okay, guys, we're going to meet here again next week on Tuesday. And we're going to present you with a scenario that you may have seen, whether you are type A, B, or C, whether you're a Joe, a Lexi, or an Eric, you may have come across this scenario. And so we'll see you next week and see what you think about that and how you should handle it. All right. Thanks, Dennis. And we'll see you guys next time.